Welcome back, everybody. I'm Sean LaFlock. I'm here with Scotty Hagnes. This is Conversations, Fitness, Wellness, and Longevity. How goes it, my shiny friend?
Pretty good. Nice and shiny.
I got some serious chromodomiage going on right now.
Yeah.
I am on a every other day schedule because if I wait too long, it gets too long, and then it's hard to shave. So I've learned my lesson about pulling my hair out at this point. However, now I'm interacting with more and more people who are in the same hair position as I, and now I am getting turned on to all sorts of shave butters and whatnot. So I might be in for a little bit smoother shave to come soon. You'll also notice that the sound of this podcast might be a little different. We're upgrading the technology here. We got a mic. That's a condensed mic that you use for, podcasting, singing. Truth be told, I use this much more for my singing adventures than I do for podcasting. But so might sound a little bit different today. But I want to pick up from where we left off last week, Scott, and just refresh everybody about what we talked about in terms of nasal breathing relative to or in relation to aerobic work.
Yeah, so touched on using nasal breathing for aerobic development, for better usage of the diaphragm, better oxygenation, more carbon dioxide, more oxygen available to the tissues, faster heart rate recovery, staying more aerobic and high output efforts once well adapted, and others. And we kind of talked about a progression, and starting with it in warm-ups and then into monostructural pieces and then intervals and then finally into kind of mixed modal stuff.
Yeah. So
does that sound about right?
That's about right. So this week I began getting touches on that. I actually put one of my athletes through a 10-minute max assault bike with nasal breathing. But once we spoke about it, I started really focusing on it. And I had mentioned last time that usually when I try to nasal breathe, my left nostril closes up. So I tried it on Saturday during some aerobic training, no mouth breathing, just breathing through the nose. And in the beginning, the effort isn't high enough that I have to really focus on breathing hard and that kind of stuff. Once I got into like that 80 to 85% effort area, this nostril would go and just completely collapse in, and there would be no air going through it. So that got me into kind of like almost a fight or flight state a little bit, like, I can't breathe. Kind of like, if you were snorkeling or something like that and you just can't get enough air in or out. I continued on with it. So it kind of showed me that, like, even though you may be restricted in your breathing, you can still kind of go. However, I wanted to kind of get to the bottom of it. And I kind of like played around with like nasal strips type stuff or kind of stretching it out. And I really didn't actually see any success with it. So I reached out to my man Miguel Argoncillo.
Oh yeah,
and Miguel's was a coach at Cressy Performance. He's now going back to PT school. So I reached out to him because he's helped me in the past before. He's an unbelievably talented coach, but he's also super, super aware of postural restoration relative to athletic performance and even aerobic performance. So he gave me this entire rundown educationally about what happens with the SEM relative to your jaw muscles, relative to your the mandibular portion of your skull, and then your sphenoid in the middle, and how there's compensatory mechanisms and push-pull mechanisms that happen, and the fact that your SEM isn't positioned properly in order for you to get balance within the jaw, which then leads to the sphenoid being pulled off. And then there's also the ocular obliques that play a factor in this as well, because your eye muscles are platformed within your skull. So with all of that, I mean, this was like and this was all via text message. So I'm piecing this together through knowledge that I have, and then Google, and then kind of feeling things out. And then it was another hour of us going back and forth, sending goofy, like moving our faces around, pictures and that kind of stuff, to the point where I now kind of have an idea of what breathing exercise integrated with a position to actually pull my sphenoid bone back into a neutral position to open up my left airway.
Oh, man.
But if you notice, as I speak during the podcast, that I naturally open my mouth on my right side. That's my dominant side, right? I've already got like a TMCC is one of the is the cervical chain that they talk about in the cervical course. I haven't taken yet, but I basically got the crash course from Miguel. So just like in a left AIC or a right brachial chain, you have muscles that are malpositioned and overcompensatory. So the SCM now is trying to be a elevator of the ribs on the right side to get more air. So now you're stuck kind of in this position, right? So to compensate, now your sphenoid is being pulled here and your jaw is being pulled here, and now your eyes are being pulled to the right. So now you have the inability to see left. The sphenoid is now unable to open the left airway, and your jaw is pulled to that side. And all along, your shoulders are turning one way, and we're kind of having this compensatory stack that we talk about. So the drill is, first is your not mandible. What's this bone back here?
What am I drawing there? I think I lost.
It is your. Oh, I'm pulling it up right now. Okay, it is your. Okay.
Yes.
Mastoid. So before yes, it's your mastoid. So your mastoid has to now be pulled to the right. So he used a great analogy. He is a break dancer and a dance enthusiast. So he did the Michael Jackson to the right. Okay, and you want to feel your mastoid kind of shift to the right. Then, once your mastoid is shifted to the right, wait, that's your left. So to your right, yes, yeah. But do that again. Notice what it feels like left and right. It's almost like your mastoid doesn't want to move to the right. It wants to move to the left because look what your neck does. Mm-hmm. That's SCM. So you're naturally leaning to the right. Yeah, so the cue, you just put your hand on your mastoid and you kind of just shift that to the right. So you're almost thinking about shifting your head toward the right. Then you're going to take your jaw and you're going to kind of move it to the left, but without your face and neck, just shifting. Then to pull it all home, you're going to look to the left. And you're going to stare at something to the left without turning your head. Now, take your right finger and place it on your right nostril, and then breathe in through your nose and forcefully exhale. Good. And it's funny how you want to look right while you're doing it. So you're going to continue to look left and keep those facial muscles relaxed and keep that mastoid being pulled to the right. Yeah.
That's hard to do.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the first time I did it, my neck crinked up. I was using too much SEM and all whatever. But it's just a nice subtle movement. It's just like kind of a gentle glide to the right, draw to the left, look left. Yeah. So that is basically repositioning your sphenoid so you can breathe better through both nostrils.
Wow.
So once I did this, I had a complete repositioning of like the left side. Like I felt more left hip, left adductor, left posterior capsule.
Oh, wow.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is probably something that has been a huge compensatory deal for me for quite some time because we've talked about before about my midline shift. And we spoke briefly about that, Miguel and I. But the midline shift happens because your left, eye muscles aren't looking left. You don't have any peripheral vision from your left side. So you're looking right. And then when you want to look left, you turn your head to the left so that you can use more of your right eye. So you're not being challenged in
Yeah.
your left peripheral, which would require you to use your your ocular obliques. But that plays a factor in the sphenoid, which stacks over that whole TMCC chain, right? The TMC chain.
Yeah. Wow.
So you can do this exercise while doing like a 90-90 hip lift with a left hip shift, a hemi bridge, so to speak, and then even a right hand reach, and then have somebody kind of wave their hand out the left field of vision so you can focus on something in that left side.
Tie it all into one big. Yeah.
Yep. So since doing this, I found a bit of improvement in my breathing already through that left nostril. Before, it would completely collapse, but if I do it now, I don't have. I mean, it was completely pinched in to the point where it was like nothing. It wouldn't even make a sound because that's how collapsed it was.
Wow.
So
I do feel, just since doing that drill here, while we talk through it, I feel, and I don't really have the side-to-side restriction that I can tell.
Yep.
But I feel like I'm getting even more volume than I normally would. So maybe it is a little restricted, and I'm just used to it.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
So yeah, maybe you could play around with that as well. But talking to Miguel about that, he's seen improvement for aerobic performance for that. But the other thing that comes to mind is if you do have a restricted airway, and you can, sleep apnea is a huge problem with a lot of people these days. But in general, mouth breathing when you go to sleep, it tends to be a very common thing for people. And when you breathe through your mouth, you're obviously in more of a sympathetic state. But then the other thing that happens is your cervical and spinal position is compromised because you have to breathe through your mouth. So you may be, completely turned on in a cervical extended position, which kind of creates more thoracic extension and lumbar extension. And now you're sitting in that position or sleeping in that position for 8+ hours, theoretically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely something that there's a lot of layers to, and it entices me to move on and take the cervical restoration course as well. Once I finish up with the pelvic restoration, because I've taken the myokinematic course and the respiratory course, but this is a whole new layer. And then even there, you can go into the PRI visual course after you've taken some of the therapeutic courses as well.
Yeah. Is the cervical an online one, or is that a...
I think you have to do that one in person. I think the respiratory, the pelvic, and the myokin can be done at home. I believe. I don't quote me on it, but I believe you have to go in person. Which
that was kind of what I thought.
It kind of stinks because then you have to kind of like go somewhere to do it, which is it's challenging for some because you got to pay for a flight, you got to pay for a hotel,
the
or
cost
Airbnb.
Goes up quite a bit.
Yeah, so the course is only like $395, which is fairly reasonable, especially for the value that you're getting. But when you're layering on all those other flights and stay, it becomes a $1,000 trip. And for some people who are kind of like, is it really worth the squeeze? But if I've seen this much improvement, I feel left abs now. I feel left hip. Like it's unbelievable. And I don't have that much of a change. And speaking into a mic that I use for singing, it actually feels like I'm more relaxed on my breath and my singing as well. So I don't know. Maybe it's placebo, but either way, I think that there's some merit to what's going on here.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. Nice. Yeah, I know of some of that cervical voodoo, but that's an area I know very little about.
I didn't appreciate the eye stuff until the connection was the fact that the those obliques in the eye itself are anchored to your skull, and I go, holy shit! Like that's the connection there. So if you can't use your left obliques in your eyes, you're going to have some kind of compensatory pattern downstream. And for those who have TMJ and all sorts of kind of jaw issues, I can imagine that it could play a significant role. And I've actually heard, I've only heard this second person. I have to actually talk to Miguel or even take the dental course as well. But the tongue plays a part in this too.
Oh yeah.
Being able to like move your jaw one way and your tongue the opposite way, and then vice versa. And you'll see that you'll have like weird feelings toward one side or the other, and that plays a role in this as too. So, I mean, dude, this is just a rabbit hole that unless you are prepared to go all the way down, do some 90-90s, some lat inhibition, and you're going to get a huge benefit from it for most people. However, you're going to run into some extreme cases, myself included, that just don't fit that mold and have to kind of go a little bit deeper. And you need someone who has experience in those areas in order for you to kind of unlock yourself completely.
Yeah. Yeah, that's. I think the basics cover a lot, but you definitely do run into some
80+%, and then you get that like 1 out of like 100 probably who need some deep dive.
Yeah,
whether it's dental vision or even the podiatry stuff.
Yeah, a little exposure to just the power of vision to change recruitment patterns and whatnot. Quite a number of years ago, I'm going to say probably a good 12 plus years ago, I dabbled in the Z Health stuff a little bit. I never did any of the courses, but I worked with a couple of coaches that were Z Health practitioners, and basically it was a series of joint mobility stuff, but there was specific instruction to have your gaze be in certain spots, directions, or whatever during some of the movements, which actually changed the recruitment. One of the things they would, if you just sit very quietly and kind of pay attention inward to where your muscles are holding tension or not, and then you just take and look to one side and you pay attention. I mean, you can feel like if I look left, I can feel muscles way down into my torso, and potentially my arms activate ever so slightly just from that act. So you can imagine that if you were doing a standing hip circle with one leg and you diverted your gaze, now there's a whole different chain of information coming in.
Yep.
And so I think part of the idea here was that we are trying to educate the nervous system to be able to control these variables with our gaze shifted over here and over here, and
man, that's huge. And then when you think about it, like, what is performance most of the time is a convergence of your vision with your movement, right? So if you're having some kind of compensatory pattern through your vision, it's going to be compensating through your movement as well. So I think that's a really, really cool way of doing it. And it's amazing how a lot of these things converge and into certain areas, like you said, like with vision in terms of movement capabilities, because they might be coming from completely different sides of the spectrum, but they always meet in similar spots. I mean, you look at DNS is another kind of movement system and education system for people, but it's triplanar movement, integrating breathing patterns into it as well, and certain visual patterns into it as well. It as well. So, it's just a matter of like like where is your starting place, but eventually kind of all roads intersect somewhere down the line.
Yeah. The different people have, chipped away at certain facets of unlocking the, movement system and putting pieces together from various ones.
Pretty amazing.
Pretty fascinating. Yeah.
Scott, we're going to have a clunky segue here, but something just came to my mind is, how ever changing and how quickly things are changing in the strength and conditioning field these days. And I just saw the other day, there was the first professional football play or NFL female strength and conditioning coach. She's an assistant for the Raiders. I'll pull up her name in a second, but you've been in this game for probably 20 years, right, Scott?
I'm sorry.
You've been in this game for about 30 years, right? Or 20 years, excuse me, 20 years, Scott, right?
Oh, yeah.
Would you think that, it would take this long, or did you ever think about this happening, for an NFL football team to have a female strength and conditioning assistant coach or coach in general.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely a milestone. Yeah, I mean, that's something I would think that would be about the last domino to fall, as far as the last locker room or facility you would probably get into as a female.
Yeah. And Kelsey Martinez is her name. Just want to, throw that out there. But
yeah, I think I have seen some things she's written, or maybe. So, yeah, the name that sounds familiar. I don't know specifically, but yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to point this out because it's amazing how undeniable some people are. This is to be, whether it's, I think probably the pinnacle of sport right now is either a football club from Europe or an NFL team. Those are pretty much the pinnacles of strength and conditioning. And for a female to be that undeniable to get to this point, she's got to be going above and beyond not only what other females are doing, but even most males are doing, because I imagine this is a pretty sought after position to be working with.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, pretty cool.
Have you got a chance to work with many female strength and conditioning coaches, Scott?
I mean, not too many. There is a female strength and conditioning coach at the University of Portland.
Oh, okay.
And I wrote her a few individual programs a number of years ago. Mm-hmm. She was in here some, and I've been up to that facility for a few workshops and things that they put on up there. That would be in a collegiate setting, that would be the one female that I've dealt with and worked with.
Yeah. I mean, I think the floodgates have kind of opened a little bit for female strength and conditioning coaches. I think a lot of the work that Eric Cressy has done to give opportunities to female strength and conditioning coaches is unbelievable. So I got to give him a shout out about that. And they're going on to do some amazing things. And the network of female strength and conditioning coaches, I got to tip my hat. But I think it leads to something a little bit bigger than just females in the strength and conditioning community. I think having the female perspective and giving them the opportunity, not handing them the opportunity, but allowing them to earn that opportunity, is something that's going to be significant in the growth of sport in general, because we're only getting a certain aspect of what's going on. You can't, one of the biggest things that I think we pride ourselves on is our experience within sport that allows us to then teach others. There's no way that I'm going to be able to fully encompass what the experience of female athletes is. It's just, I'm just not going to be able to. So to get the opportunity for coaches on this level to get out there and then be able to disseminate knowledge from that perspective is something unbelievable.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I think such a different, more well-rounded perspective. I think in some cases, for sure. I mean, in our realm, CrossFit realm, I mean, it's not unusual at all to have a very, very talented female coach.
Speaking of which, Michelle Latondra, who's the coach of Laura Horvath, Patrick Vellner, and then I believe two other high-level athletes that come off the top of my head, but right there, Horvath and Vellner.
Two big ones right there for sure.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And I mean, and obviously she was a very high-level athlete herself. So, I mean, we always talk about opportunity versus, versus, the circumstances that you're dealt. If you're able to overcome your circumstances in a position like that, you're almost better off than people who were given unbelievable circumstances and had all the opportunities in the world.
Oh yeah, totally. I think, have to deal with, finding your way, setbacks, and making.
And it brings you that
good enough they can't ignore you.
Undeniable.
Yeah. Being so good you can't be ignored.
Exactly. And I think that's probably a good place to stop off for today there, Scott. You got anything else?
No, I think that's it for today.
Perfect. Well, I'm Sean LaFlock. You can get me at sean@crossfitdiarrhybeach.com.
I'm Scott Hagnes. You can get me at scott@crossfitportland.com.
All right, Scotty. Enjoy the rest of your week, my friend.
Yeah, you too.
All right, brother.
Take care.
I'll talk to you next week.
Keep shining.
Yeah, I'll keep shining.
All right.
Later, brother. Bye.
All right, later.